Welcome to Talking Giants presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner. Not here with my co-host, Justin Pennick. We got our annual mid-round prospect preview with Nick Falato. So we're going to get right into that. Not wasting your time. We'll announce Patreons on the Friday show. Friday, beginning of draft month, we're going to be reviewing the edge. So really excited about that. So really tune in for us for the next month. But we're here to talk mid-round guys with Nick Falato. So this is the soft launch of draft month, even though it's not draft month. Got a mock draft video coming out Monday, too. Going to be a lot of good stuff. So we're going to kick it to the Nick Falato interview. But before that, this episode is brought to you by DraftKings. College basketball fans, join the action on the court during the biggest tournament of the year with DraftKings Sportsbook. Turn your team's victory into your own big win. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. It's that simple. If they win, you win. Really disappointed in Miami. Was feeling real cocky at halftime, and then just Kansas was too big and fast, essentially. And then St. Peter's was like, okay, well, at least I'll be able to have some rooting interest in St. Peter's. Nope. But we got UNC Duke, Villanova, Kansas. I mean, it's a blue blood invitational. Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet. You can still join the college hoops actions with DraftKings pools. Everyone can play free pools all March long for a shot at a share of $250,000 in prizes. Simply join a pool and answer questions like who will make it to the next round and who will hit the most three-pointers, then track the results. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code JOHNBOY. Bet $5 on any college hoops team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If they win, you win with promo code JOHNBOY this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 plus restrictions apply. See show notes for details. See next band. All right, and now we're going to kick it to a Big Blue Banter, Nick Falato. All right, we now welcome on for our annual episode. It's the episode we do before our official draft month kicks off. We have Nick Falato of the Big Blue Banter podcast going through 6 mid-round prospects, and we usually wander off and go down rabbit holes talking about the draft too. I will say, Nick, one, how you doing? But there's got to be some type of heavy weight on your shoulders because we only talk about 6 guys. And 2020, we talked about Matt Parrott. In 2021, we talked about Ellison Smith. So if you could do it 2 years in a row, it's like, oh, that's a fun fact. 3 years in a row, it's like, okay, you just flat out know what the Giants want in the mid-rounds.
I appreciate that. And I am doing well, Bobby. It's always great to talk NFL draft and just Giants with you. But yeah, the weight is pretty heavy on my shoulders right now. And I'm not going to lie, when the draft rolls around, I'm going to be crossing my fingers, hoping that one of these guys ends up wearing blue.
Yeah, there's 6 guys on this. There's 2 that I would be thrilled with, and I think we're talking Drake Jackson, edge out of USC, Leo Chanel, Wisconsin linebacker, Damone Clark, Greg Dulcich, Luke Fortner, and then Cam Taylor-Britt. So those are the 6 guys we're hitting on. If you didn't see it in the episode description, how are you? Before we get into it, how are you feeling about the Giants at pick 5 and 7? I know we talked a little bit about it before we hit record, but are you praying for one of those tackles at 5? Would you got an opinion on the Ahmad Gardner versus Kayvon debate?
So I haven't watched Ahmad Gardner, but I just put out a piece at Big Blue View on Wink Martindale's importance with cornerbacks in his system over edge. But with that said, I really liked Kayvon Thibodeaux's tape. I was a big fan of what he could offer. I watched a lot of his tape, all the tape that I could get my hands on. I don't know where the narrative came from that he takes plays off.
I don't either. It doesn't make any sense to me. I didn't find a single rep.
No, I didn't find any reps of that. I actually found it that he was making consistent plays on the backside in pursuit and really just kind of playing with his hair on fire. Excellent competitive toughness. So I understand people are a little bit have reservations, I guess you could say, about the Joel Klatt interview that happened in January. We kind of took a slight at Alabama and talked about life after football and, how these old heads in the NFL will look at that and be like, this guy doesn't love football. We don't know if we could draft him. I think that's a little bit overthinking it because I think if you get this guy, he's going to be an immediate impact player. So I would like to get KT, but in terms of my ideal situation, I want the Giants. A trade back is definitely on my mind, but I want the Giants to get that right tackle because I think right tackle is the glaring need. There are a lot of needs, but the glaring need right now, because I don't think the Giants can go into the season relying on a Matt Gano or a Matt Parrott, who's coming off of an injury. So I think you need to get that right tackle. And I would love to have an Evan Neal or an Ike Ekwonu. Still have to watch Ekwonu, but I feel like I would like him with Andrew Thomas for the next, decade, hopefully, if they sign second contracts with the Giants. So I really want to secure the tackle position, got to fix that offensive line and find Wink Martindale a piece. But if the Giants can trade back at 7 or even 5 and have someone come up, get draft capital for next year, pick up, 2 extra day 2 picks in this draft, because this is a very, very deep draft. I think I would be hard pressed to say no to that. And that's one of the best things I love about this draft process, specifically in this year, Bobby. And I want to get your opinion on this. It's just so deep. And there are so many avenues to which Joe Schoen can take where I feel like it's going to be successful. And that's something that I love. We're starting new. The expectations are low right now. And I think the ability to grow and build this roster in the image of what this coaching staff and Joe Schoen want, I think it's something that is very alluring. And it's a different kind of feel right now. And I'm appreciative of that.
I agree with you with the tackle take. Like, there's a lot of holes on this team, but right tackle is the most glaring. It's the hardest to do with a vet minimum deal in free agency. And it's the hardest one to have a bad player at and be able to operate, because they do want to be able to operate their offenses and defenses this year, where, you could put a vet minimum guy at nose tackle. You can put a vet minimum guy as your tight end and not be stressing about it. But you put a vet minimum guy at right tackle, and that's a huge issue. Or like you said, Matt Gano, or, you can't trust Matt Parrott coming off of the injury. And we didn't even get it. We didn't even get any Matt Parrott starts where it was just, hey, we're starting him over Nate Solder last year. So that's where I feel. So, like, the only way I wouldn't want to trade back is if, like, hey, one of the tackles is off the board, we're at 5, and it's like, nah, I'm taking one of those tackles. But yeah, I would love to trade back, because there are so many holes. Like, I haven't remember the last time the Giants went into a draft where they had so many needs, at starting spots and depth spots, and it's changed the way I've prep for the first round. Where in previous years, I kind of have an idea of what positions to really nail in on. With this year, it's like you got to nail in on the top guys at every single position, even wide receiver. Like, I wouldn't be blown away if they trade back to 12, 13 and pick one of the wide receivers. It's like, okay, you got to do your wide receiver prep at the top of the round. So yeah, I would love for a trade back. But at the end of the day, like, my biggest goal for this draft is get that right tackle hole filled.
And I always think about that right tackle before we get into these 6 prospects. I think this is an interesting exercise to have with you, because I know you really know the Giants as well. If they do not land an Ickey, and they don't sign somebody who's competent, and they don't get Evan Neal, you have the options of Charles Cross, right? And there's a lot of talk on the timeline right now of Charles Cross. Now, it's a little bit of a projection because he's never played right tackle. I like the idea of Cross, but that is such a big risk. And I know Brandon Thorne, who is an offensive line expert, talks about the transition from an air raid blocking scheme and the splits that Charles Cross is going to have to kind of adjust to, and how different that is in a pro style offense in the NFL. That's going to be a big adjustment. I like the idea of Cross, but I can't go into that and be like, yeah, for certain, this is going to definitely work out. Now, the Giants could go in another direction in the first round. Then you have other tackles in this draft. I've heard a lot of good things about Washington State's Abe Lucas, who is a right tackle, who played right tackle out there. So I'm wondering if there is somebody a little bit later in this draft that they could get at tackle who could be an adequate addition early, who could be groomed into a solid developmental piece, or maybe more than a developmental piece, but a solid starter. And this draft class is deep, and even at tackle everywhere. So I'm wondering if that's something they could do. I got to watch a little bit more film on those day 2 tackles, though.
Yeah, I got to watch more. Daniel Falele out of Minnesota. Now, the thing that scares me is that he is 387 pounds, and it's like, can that guy hold up health-wise, But if you can guarantee health, I'm like, okay, if you promise me we can get him in the second round, I'm fine with that. Like, I like him a lot more than most people do. And especially if you're putting him at right tackle and you're putting him with Bobby Johnson, who's not going to put him in a lot of vertical sets. You're going to have him 45 setting, jump setting there. But I just think you look at the history of it, and I kind of hate doing this with the draft because, like, we'll talk about players and not trends all the time, but it's like you look at the history, man. It's like it's hard to find good tackle play, and it's much harder once you leave that first round, like much harder. Like, you look at the starting tackles and the good ones; they're almost all first rounders. It's very rare you have a really good tackle who wasn't a first round pick. So Cross, listen, if they trade back into the 20s, I'd be more open to the Cross idea, but I am. That's my biggest fear right now, is that the Giants see that glaring hole and they settle on Cross at 5 or 7.
Yeah, I have that same fear, especially if you're talking about taking a Cross over a Kayvon Thibodeau or over a Sauce or a player like that. That's where I would have a big problem with doing that. Although I like the traits and the idea of Cross, there's just so much more that go into his evaluation because of the system that he played in college.
Right. All right, let's get into these 6 guys. Yeah, we want to start on the offensive side. And I think since The Giants don't really have a starter at this, or they don't have a starter unless you are, really high on Ricky Seals-Jones. Tight end. This guy is fun, and I think the conversation around him, especially from a Giants fan point of view, with just having the Evan Ingram experience for 5 years, is going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, you want to start with Greg Dulcich?
Yeah, UCLA tight end Greg Dulcich.
I thought we were going to go with Fortner, my guy out of Kentucky. But
well, let's go Fortner then. The offensive line's important. We're teasing Dulcich. Let's start with the Kentucky center/guard Luke Fortner.
Okay, so Fortner, I came across his tape studying Darian Kinnard, who was a right tackle at Kentucky, and I thought Kinnard he'd probably be ideal if you plug him in as a guard because he's a little bit heavy-footed, balance issues, all those things. But I was watching his tape, and in the first game, I was like, dude, who the heck is this center? This guy's probably going to be a good prospect in a couple of years. Let me look him up. I was like, oh, dude, this guy's draft eligible right now, and he's already committed to going to the draft. He was a redshirt senior, so he's not going back to school. And I just felt like he was wildly smart, understood angles, understood leverage, and wasn't necessarily totally strong at the point of attack, but did an excellent job in space, climbing up to the second levels. If they kicked him out on screens, he was good at locating. And I felt like he always drove his feet through contact, did a good job resetting his hands and kind of hand technique, hand fighting. My one, issue with him was power at the point of attack. I didn't think it was glaring, but I did see just, a little bit of reservations here as to why he might not be talked about with some of the other interior offensive linemen. Since that evaluation that I wrote up for Sports Illustrated, I feel like a lot more national people are talking about Luke Fortner. But I look at him and I honestly think, 6'4", 307 pounds, 33 and 1/8 inch arms, didn't blow the combine away by any means, but this dude's a mechanical engineer major. You're talking about one of the positions in football that you need brains if you're going to set protections and do all of those things. Fortner offered all that in one of the better, one of the more, I guess you could say, creative offenses at Kentucky with Will Levis at quarterback, have Kinnard, So I'm looking at day 2, possibly day 3. I don't know if he'd fall to the 4th round. Giants need interior offensive line help. They need depth. And I think Luke Fortner was somebody that I appreciated for the New York Giants in that range of the draft.
Yeah, I agree with you at the point of attack. Like when you see the difference when he's single blocking versus working double teams. When he's those single blocks for the nose tackles, he just doesn't get that first pop. Well, I will say that I think is the most impressive out of him is his hand strength. Like you see him torquing guys, and that works with the double team whenever a defensive lineman tries to shift his weight or redirect. Like he's torquing. I mean, there's even reps versus Jordan Davis of Georgia where he's putting he's torquing Jordan Davis on the ground. That's something that Nick Gates was actually really good at because Nick Gates didn't have like the greatest pop at the point like you said, but had that hand strength to torque guys and working with angles.
And he also, just the tightness of the punch, right? It was direct. It wasn't wide. He wasn't tonging. It was direct and it was low to high, quick and efficient. Get your hands inside and use that torque. And I felt like he understood leverage, despite the fact that he's 6'4", so it's a little bit taller for a center. I feel like that's kind of average. I think Nick Gates is 6'5", but he understood, like you said, that torque and had that good grip strength. He has 10+ inch hands, so there's a lot to I feel like about the interior offensive line class in terms of the depth. Fortner's one of the guys that I really like. There's Cam Jurgens from Nebraska. I don't know if you watched him yet. He's really interesting because he was a tight end convert who started playing center, so he's a little bit new to the position, but just wildly athletic. Another one who excellent at taking angles, the precise right angles of attack, which obviously as an offensive lineman is one of the more underrated parts of playing the offensive line. So between him, Cam Jurgens from Nebraska, and Luke Fortner from Kentucky, I hope the Giants end up with one of those guys somewhere late day 2, early day 3.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, he's got the good frame. I view Fortner as kind of like hey, year 1, stash him, let him work on the things he needs to work on, and then year 2, reevaluate him. You mentioned getting to he's not athletic, but he makes up for it, like you said, with the angles, getting to the second level. He gets to the second level in a hurry. And he delivers a nice blow. When he has the strength advantage, he wins those reps consistently, And so when he's going up against a linebacker, I mean he's tossing around guys a lot. My biggest worry though is in pass blocking, I feel like when he's decent at mirroring, but when the defensive lineman is going the opposite way of his first step, he has a hard time recovering. And I just don't see there's always going to be struggles pass blocking, but I want to see more like great reps out of Luke Fortner in the pass blocking. Like, listen, I'm not perfect games, obviously, in the mid round, but I wish there were more like, man, this is a rep that gets me excited in the pass blocking game, and I feel like he's getting good results the majority of the time, but there's just never like those dominant reps.
I think that's a fair critique. But again, I think in that area of the draft, these are the types of players that you're looking for, just competency. And another thing, he is versatile as well. He played center the entire year in 2021, but before that, he was playing left guard. He has a lot of snaps at right guard as well. And as we know, with the depth that the Giants have had along their offensive line, or the dearth of depth, I should say, versatility is a key. It was a big part of what Joe Judge wanted for the team. And I think it's going to be a big part of what Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll want, and what really any NFL team wants.
Yeah, and they just signed John Feliciano, who isn't anything to write home about, but like he can be a stopgap starter, and not. And I think that's key with this new regime of offensive line is investing in it, not just like, all right, we draft this guy, he's going to be the guy to start. Like, let these guys sit and let kind of the best man win at the spot. Where in the last 4 years, it's been guys have been thrown in way too quickly. Like Shane Lemieux was thrown in too quickly. Like I love Shane Lemieux as a 5th round pick, but as a rookie, he's going to struggle, so it'd be awesome to get a guy like Luke Fortner like on day 3 and then let him sit for a year. And like I said, reevaluate after that first year.
I think that's fair. And in terms of Shane Lemieux too, I'm wondering with Luke Fortner, I think Luke Fortner would be better than Lemieux in that rookie season in terms of his ability to handle even power off the snap. Because I would agree, and I have it in my evaluation, the pop and the power at the point of attack isn't necessarily there with Fortner. But I think one of my biggest gripes with Lemieux, if we go back to that rookie season in 2020, was right off the snap, if someone hit him with a power move, he couldn't really readjust. There was some sort of balance issue once he was hit with that initial power. I think Fortner's a little bit better than him in that area. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with that, and that's where I said, like, hey, he doesn't have the dominant pass blocking reps, but he doesn't have the ugly ones either because he's able to readjust. Before we move on to the next guy, you mentioned Darian Kinnard. He's the most frustrating player in the draft to me because he has like everything you want. Obviously, I agree with you moving from tackle to guard, but it's so sloppy. Like he's a sloppy player, and it's like, man, like he would be if I was, a scout. It's like that would be he'd be my number one. Like I need to talk to this guy, figure out his work ethic type of thing, because it's like, man, you love everything he's working with, but there's just a lot that needs to be fixed about his game.
Well, you brought up Falele before, and similar, Kinnard's about 40 pounds less, which is just insane to think about. But Kinnard was probably playing overweight last year, and he did cut some weight, if I'm not mistaken, when he went down to the Reese's Senior Bowl and while he was at the combine, which in theory will make you quicker. I still have questions about that foot speed, that ability to frame blocks when you're out on an island. And that's why he's being projected as a guard and not a tackle, despite the fact that he was pretty adamant at the Reese's Senior Bowl. Like, I'm a right tackle. I'm going to be a right tackle. I'm like, homeboy, man, you might want to kick inside and play guard if I'm going to be real with you. I think the power and the drive on contact that he provides is going to appeal to these power rushing teams. I mean, you have that guy down block like a 4-eye or a 3 technique. If you do align him at tackle, or 1 technique, if you have him at guard, it's going to, that player is going to move. He's going to generate that kind of pop on contact and that power that you need, that is necessary. But man, is he sloppy with his hands? His pad level just rises right off the snap, exposes his chest wide with his hands, going to draw a lot of holding penalties. And those are things that I feel like are going to get you in trouble. Do you remember Jackson Carman last year out of Clemson? Yeah. I don't want to make a true comparison between those two players, but I see similarities in terms of their adjustment going forward in the NFL. Carman is on the Bengals. He couldn't earn too many snaps on the Bengals, or at least they were a little hesitant to play him, but then injuries, he ended up kind of playing. And I don't know if he's a part of their long-term solution there in Cincinnati, but I think that could be something with Darian Kinnard if Kinnard doesn't really hunker down and work on that technique.
Right. All right, next on the list, tight end, which is a huge hole for the Giants. If you looked at like, hey, we don't know even who's going to get reps at this position. Like nose tackle and tight end were 2 of them. The Giants signed at nose tackle, so that's Phil. Tight end, it's like Ricky Seals-Jones is a nice backup, but he ideally he would be your third guy. So what do we got on UCLA tight end Greg Dulcich?
I like Dolchik, man. I think he's probably going to end up going day two. He was once thought of more as a day three type of guy, but he is a good athlete, dude, and he can stretch the field vertically. And he's not that great of a blocker, so people are going to make those comparisons to Evan Ingram. But this guy, to me, is a much better catcher of the football. He had 4 drops this last year, but when you watch how natural his hands are on those deep big routes over the middle of the field in contested situations through traffic, through congestion, he has big hands, bro. When he goes up and he plucks the ball, his hands are 10 and 7/8 of an inch. It's almost 11 inches, Bobby. That is big for a tight end. Has just under 34-inch arms as well. So this guy has a wide catch radius. I think he can be a vertical option, more of probably like an F or an H back than somebody that you want to align in line. I think Trey McBride can be a Y tight end. He's not the best blocker, but I think you can get away with that because you're not looking for, Joe Thomas as a tight end. I think Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State can be a good wide tight end, but it's hard to find true wide tight ends. I heard good things about Cade Otton, the kid from Washington. I haven't got my eyes on him yet, but I've heard that he could possibly be that as well. Dolchik isn't exactly that, but in terms of a move tight end who can be a mismatch, and I know Giant fans hate to hear that because they think of Evan Ingram, but this guy's a better route runner, has better hands than Evan Ingram, and I think he's an interesting piece for an offense and somebody that can stretch the field vertically, horizontally, and be effective at all 3 levels of the field.
Well, yeah, and he is a better route runner than Evan Ingram, and I think that's something that always got lost in the shovel with Evan Ingram with the drops and the blocking is like, honestly, his major issue is he's a bad route runner. Like Evan Ingram was a bad route runner for the Giants, and obviously scheme with Jason Garrett didn't help him. I thought Pat Shurmur used him well, and he had good results with Pat Shurmur, but outside of scheme, you got to do your part, and Evan Ingram didn't do his part a lot. So it's like I wouldn't compare him to Ingram. Is like I would compare him more to Dawson Knox, and like look how valuable that guy. Not to say he's the same player as Knox, but like look how I'm just saying like how valuable that guy was for Brian Daboll and the Buffalo Bills. As a mid-round pick, like you said, he's rising, and like you said, it could be a second rounder at this point. Like some people have him like as a top 50 player. But and then obviously like the thing like you said that we love the most is the speed. Like he just glides down the field. Like he dominated LSU. I was actually watching I had watched Dolchich before we had put together this list. I was watching some 2020 Drake Jackson in prep for this, and it's like there's Dolchich flying, just gliding for a 75-yard touchdown. So you consistently see those plays, and it's hard to not get excited about him.
Absolutely. I mean, I would welcome him on the New York Giants, to be honest. My thing is Ricky Seals-Jones isn't a blocker either. So who's going to be your blocking type of tight end? Because that is important. Ricky Seals-Jones, I don't understand how he doesn't get flagged on every single play. That dude is so wild with his hands, bro. He hugs like all the time, Bobby.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, Greg Dolchich isn't a good blocker, but he's a better blocker than Ricky Seals. Like he's like the phrase "willing blocker." I feel like gets thrown around to any draft tight end that's not a good blocker. But Dolchich is Ricky Seals-Jones, and I don't like to question guy's effort, but it's like he's not a willing blocker. Like his blocking is flat out like it's pitiful. Like it's worse than any tight end I've seen for the Giants. Like he makes Evan Ingram look like a decent blocker. Ricky Seals-Jones. So at least Greg Dolchich is a willing blocker, and after moving from wide receiver is still obviously getting some. But there was some Greg Dolchich versus Drake Jackson reps where it's like Dolchich won a couple reps in a row versus Drake Jackson, the edge out of USC.
Yeah, and Dolchich too, they used him a lot on like split flow action. I don't know if you watched the Oregon game, but he had the unfortunate task of kicking out the end man on the line of scrimmage, one named Kayvon Thibodeau.
Oh my gosh, that rep was disgusting by Thibodeau. It's like, why did you do this, Chip Kelly? But yeah, that was a disgusting rep.
Yeah, I felt bad for him. But again, that's not his game. I think what he can offer as a receiving threat is something that teams were going to be looking for on day two. And I think he's kind of had this offseason at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine where he's put himself in this position to be in the conversation with Trey McBride, Jeremy Ruckert. I think he's maybe slightly below those two, but he's at least in the conversation.
Yeah, I have Trey McBride one. I definitely have Dolchich over Ruckert out of Ohio State. But I was down in Mobile, and I thought the tight end group was the overall strongest group down there, man. And Dolchich was flying, And again, there's guys who can't block, and there's guys like Cole Turner out of Nevada who can't block, And I think Dolchich comes into that one where, like, again, you don't want to use him. You don't want to be running wide zone with him on the play side, but you can get away with him on the back side when you do want to line him up as that traditional wide tight end.
And that's important too. That's something that gets lost in the shuffle. And you look at some of these other tight ends in the pre-draft process, like Texas A&M's Jalen Weidemeyer. That dude just ran like a 5.03 at his pro day. Like that dude is gonna fall because of that, man.
Lance Zierlein pointed out, he's like, there's never been a pass catching tight end to have these numbers and be drafted. Like he's gonna go undrafted. I haven't watched him yet, so I don't want to say that. But it was like, man, that was a. Someone said that like they must have been running on sand at Texas A&M. Like all of their times were horrible.
Yeah, Spiller was horrible too. It was in like the 4.6s. And Spiller wasn't one that I felt like was going to run a 4.3 or anything like that. But I thought, maybe like a 4.49, 4.53, somewhere in between that range. Weidemeyer, I thought, would be like a 4.8 guy. I didn't see somebody who was overly sudden. I think he does a good job using his frame, using that contested catch ability. Although that Auburn game was terrible. He had like 3 just mind-blowing drops. But with those testing numbers, man, like you just shouldn't have tested. You just shouldn't have showed up to your pro day.
Texas, quick. Have you watched Kenyon Green yet out of Texas A&M?
I did watch Kenyon Green.
I'm full bloom love with Kenyon Green. I think he's the best guard since Quentin Nelson in the draft. Like I know he had really bad testing at the combine, which made me go, all right, let me go back and watch this guy. But I feel like just play in, play out, he dominates at the guard spot. Like in anything that he was asked to do.
Yeah, Kenyon Green for me, I liked him. I had a first-round grade, I believe, on Kenyon Green, but I think I'm higher on Zion Johnson.
Really? I like Zion a lot too, but I like Kenyon Green so much more.
There was something about Kenyon Green, and I saw some interior offensive line tape. I saw a lot of offensive tackle tape, so it's a little bit jumbled because the versatility is something that I absolutely loved. I loved his finishing ability. I didn't think his hands were as consistent as I wanted them to be. I thought they could get a little bit high and not as probably straight or tight as I necessarily would have liked. And I also thought the footwork at times wasn't great when he was kind of going into his power step. I felt like he would sometimes like tap that inside foot instead of plant it in the ground and drive into his target. And he would still have the play strength to have success on those plays. But I feel like there's more play strength that can be maximized. He kind of cleans that up a bit. I don't know if you saw that at all. And this is why I like coming on podcasts with people like you who watch the film and everything like that, because there's going to be disagreements and that's fine.
You see it at tackle, but when like watch his 2020 versus Alabama at guard, and I mean his hands are being shot in the chest every single time, like just dominant, like every single pass rep is dominant, like just dominates the guy on every single rep. Like so, I've watched him at tackle, which is like that's nice and all, but you're not gonna be a tackle in the NFL. I watch his guard stuff, man, and anytime I watch him play guard, like I fall in love. And it's like, if Zion Johnson had to play tackle in the SEC, I think maybe there would be some of those other words. But it's like he's going to play guard, and whenever he's playing guard, like he just has dominant rep after dominant rep.
Yeah, and I mean he's somebody that definitely interests me. Like I said, I had a low first round grade on him, and I'm pretty particular. I don't give a lot of first round grades out, and he cracked that barrel for me. So somebody I like, but there were things that I felt like could be cleaned up.
All right, let's move to the defensive side. We have Wink Martindale's the defensive coordinator who has his types. Who do you want to roll with first?
Yeah, I think we should start with the edge, Drake Jackson. So this is somebody who could be available in the 3rd round for the Giants because start with the bad. It's not that great against the run. Now, I felt like there were reps where he would go up against the tight end and he would win, but then I would see him lose a couple reps against tight ends, which you never want to see. But then I'd see him set the edge against the tackle. And you're like, well, why is this a little bit inconsistent? I think the overall technique in terms of the hands, in terms of consistent leverage, is something that he struggled with in terms of a run defender. So why are we talking about him? Because what he can do as a pass rusher, he might have the best bend in this class, man, the best ability to kind of shoot up the pass rushing arc using his explosiveness, win that outside corner, dip at the waist, and put a lot of stress on that ankle joint and flatten and soften the angle through contact to get to the quarterback. I felt like his ability to bend that edge and stress that edge is something that teams are going to love. Now, the issue is, can he play on early downs? And that's where I'm a little bit concerned.
Yeah, he's really weak. Like, we're talking about being weak at the point. Like, he's really bad at the point of attack. Like, really bad, and that's what worries me. Like you said, he has the ability to stress tackles with that speed and his long arms. Like, he really screws up tackles, punches, and like you said, he's able to to dip that edge. The thing that worries me the most, though, is like, yeah, you can get him better in the run game and stuff. Like, I feel like that can be improved on, but he doesn't counter at all. I just feel like it's just like, it's like watching this long athletic guy, but it's like, just put it together consistently. And he doesn't. He has those wow reps, but it's like he just doesn't put it together consistently. And like you said, like he gets moved in the run game, like and pretty easily and consistently.
So I think a reason why he's a little bit weak against the run, which is very, very apparent in his 2021 tape. If you go back to his freshman year, he was like 260, 265, and he cut a lot of weight going into 2020, got down to like, 250, and now he's 254 at the combine. He was a little bit stronger at the point of attack then. He was asked to cut weight, and that kind of changed his game. So I'm wondering how he would be if you put that weight back on in terms of strength at the point of attack. I think that's something to ponder. But in terms of just the speed, the explosiveness, the quickness, and then the flexion throughout his lower body and his ability to get into tackles outside shoulders, that's something NFL teams are going to love. Just that overall twitch and the suddenness that he possesses. But I have to agree, man, from the 2021 tape, it's an issue, the run defense. One thing that is going for him, though, Bobby, that I feel like is pretty good, his ability to drop into coverage, man. I mean, it was evident.
I ask you about that.
Yeah, it was evident at the combine. But when you turn on his tape as well, I think he dropped into coverage about 23% of the snaps, or at least 23% of the passes that he faced. And he looks pretty fluid, man. He looks pretty fluid. He blew one coverage, which was like a tight end wheel route that got around him when he was dropping into a shallow zone. And it wasn't a catch, so it doesn't really kind of pop up on the box score, but that was one that kind of popped out to me. But I felt like it looked natural. And I know Wink Martindale is going to be looking for these 3-4 outside linebacker types who can align inside, which Drake Jackson has done. And he can also drop into coverage, which, Martindale, he's going to be bringing safeties. He's going to need some people to drop into coverage off the line of scrimmage from a 2-point stance, from a 3-point stance. Drake Jackson has all of that in his wheelhouse and has displayed that in college. But it's always going to come down to that run defense, that strength at the point of attack. And that's probably why we're not talking about him as a top 20 pick.
Right. And I was going to ask you about what you thought about his coverage ability. Something I noticed is there was times where they'd line him up inside and you'd see him have like dominant reps, like making guys miss. And I feel like in the run game, he's got great athleticism, but it's like you're not going to just beat tackles on purely athleticism in the run game. But when he was inside, like he could, like, he was making guys miss, shooting gaps. I don't think he'll ever be a full-time inside player, but do you think that's something that like you can utilize to kind of get by the first year or so?
Only in obvious passing situations, because if it's, 2nd and 10, they'll just run the football at him and they'll probably check to him and be like, yo, this guy's on the line of scrimmage. Yo, we're going to bully him off. And I think one other thing that I'm a little concerned about in terms of rushing the passer, he doesn't have any really much tape of him converting speed to power. It doesn't really have a power element. No. And you brought up the counter moves, and that's also a good point. It doesn't necessarily have a good counter move that really just jumps out at you that you really love. But the finesse part of his game, like if you played Madden and you were drafting him in Madden, his finesse pass rushing would be A plus, because he has that part of his game down. There's just still a lot more development that needs to happen.
Where are you comfortable taking him?
It would have to be after day 2. This would have to be or after the 2nd round. I think in the 3rd round, the Giants have 2 3rd-round picks. I could possibly entertain it, but it's something that I'll always have in the back of my mind. Because if you look at the Giants right now, they have Ellerson Smith. They have Oshane Ximines. Both those guys, they're not the same as Drake Jackson. I feel like Drake Jackson is more dynamic in terms of winning the edge and bending through contact. But both of those guys can't really play the run that well, at least not right now. Oshane, I think that's done with, but Ellerson Smith, he can develop into that. And I feel like he still has the frame to put more weight on. Whereas I don't know if they're going to go after someone like a Drake Jackson with those guys still on the roster. But again, this is the new general manager. They might see him as their guy and they could bring him in. And we know, go over Baltimore's film, man, just how they used every defensive player in their defensive rotation. A lot of guys in the Joe Judge era, they were just special teamers. You would never want to see Nate Ebner out there. Every time he was out there, I was like, dude, what the heck is he doing out there? Like, is everybody hurt? Like, what the heck? I felt like Martindale used everybody that they had in a rotation, and they would come out with, multiple outside linebackers all throughout their defense. Move Patrick Queen, get outside linebackers in there, and we're just going to really deceive the crap out of the offense, whether we're going to drop in coverage, whether we can defend the run, which is the issue with him, or we can rush the passer. He has the passer, rushing the passer down. He has the coverage down. Doesn't have the run defense right now.
Yeah, and Wink ran 4 outside linebackers at times. I was talking with gosh, I forget his name. I think you guys had him on too.
Ken McCusick, he's
Ken
great.
McCusick. He's like, there was a one time he ran like 5, and it's like, man, okay. So it's like, all right, edge is a big position of need for the Giants. They basically have Azeez Ojulari as their only like, he's going to be here piece. I think Quincy Roche is a nice piece as depth. Jihad Ward, and that's kind of it, because Ellerson Smith is such a developmental player at this point. We don't know what, like, I'm not putting any expectations on Ellerson Smith until I see him play 30 to 40% of the snaps in one game. Like, I just want to see that out of him. And like we talked about him on last year's, like, he has more weight to put on. He's got that ability, but it's like, we got to see it. And we didn't even get to see him in 2020 because of, Northern Iowa not playing.
Exactly. And he missed most of training camp because he got injured in training camp and a lot of the season last year. So there's warranted excuses in my mind for Ellerson Smith's development, but we're going to have to see it eventually. Yeah. We brought up the edge group just because we're talking about it. There are so many edges in this class. This is such a deep edge class. So I'm interested in other edges other than Drake Jackson. I'm trying to pick somebody who could realistically be there in the third. Like, I would take Boye Mafe. I think Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State, Boye Mafe from Minnesota. Those guys really stand out. Logan Hall, I think he's more he wants to be a 3 technique, but he fits the mold of a bigger type of guy like Jihad Ward. He's not as big as Jihad Ward, but he's a bigger dude. I love Logan Hall, but he does kind of stand up right off the snap, expose his chest. It's like, bro, keep your leverage a little low. But he's another interesting player, kid out of Houston.
Yeah, you mentioned Ebiketie and Mafe. I like both. I like Ebiketie a lot. I think more than most people. But hey, like these drafts, like, especially now that's a new regime, like, you really are, like, you got to hit your first and second rounders, but the third to 6th round. That's why I like talking about it with you, because I know you do your work. Is like, this is where Super Bowls are won. Is in these rounds 3 through 6. So, who's your next guy on the list?
All right, so I know you love this guy, and I really like him as well.
Love this guy.
And I think he is the perfect fit for what Wink Martindale wants to do, and that is Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin, linebacker. Sorry, you might hear some stuff in the background. I live right off of a road here in Arizona, and everybody loves revving their engine. Huge thing out here. Don't get it. But I really like what Leo Chenal could offer because he comes from Jim Leonard's defense in Wisconsin, which is a pressure-heavy defense. And if you watch him in his first season in 2020, he was used a lot as kind of a stack linebacker behind the nose tackle. And then he started in 2021 kind of expanding his role, played a little bit more in coverage, which I still think is a work in progress. His agility in space, which is weird to say because he just had such a great combine. He tested so well athletically. And I want to get your take on this. I feel like he probably tested better athletically than what his tape would suggest, but I don't think he's a deficient athlete at all. But he's definitely more of I'm maximizing my athletic ability when I'm going forward, when I'm using my burst and my acceleration to go forward. Moving laterally, there's a little bit of hip tightness that I saw. But I think as a blitzing option in Wink Martindale's scheme, this guy is an excellent target on day 2 who could really kind of help turn this defense into the image that Wink Martindale really wants to kind of cultivate here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does it. Like, he's that prototypical linebacker who can do anything that's asked of him. You mentioned in coverage, like you said, let me look up the note I have on his agility, blah, blah, blah. Not the best tackler in open space, which speaks to agility, like not talking about in the box, but like in open space. And then that shows up in coverage a little bit, but also in coverage, like he's the linebacker who can keep his eyes on the QB, but also can recognize patterns, concepts, and like shut down like progressions. There was many a times, especially in the Iowa game, where it's like he just ruined this progression for the quarterback. Just ruined this progression, and they're getting a sack because he ruined the second read of this quarterback. So like getting in the way of those, like in man coverage, which linebackers aren't put in man coverage a ton. I know Wink Martindale might ask a little more out of that, out of their inside linebackers, but it's like he's does an all right, an adequate job, but like as a pass rusher, like there's usually like inside linebackers, like they're either timing pass rushers or they're like, they can put them on the A-gap, win one-on-one. And those guys are like extremely hard to find. Like you really don't see him at the NFL level. And he can do that, and again, watching him versus Tyler Linderbaum, it's like, who had the better day, Tyler Linderbaum or Leo Chenal? Leo Chenal, to me, like he had dominant reps, and then just the hands, man. They pack so much power, and starting through with the feet, and like you said, he had a 40.5-inch vertical jump. I mean, he just used those hands to disengage, to displace offensive linemen, and get under their chest, man, and just makes play after play after play in the run game. So like I'm really excited about him. I always find everyone talks about the first round. I always find an inside linebacker. It just seems that every year I find an inside linebacker that I just love that's not in that first round hype. But Leo Chenal right now is that guy for me because it's just he does everything well. Like coverage, there can be more, but it's like you see there's room for growth there that he can hit, and you see really good plays. Like that's what I look for a linebacker is not being lost in coverage and having good plays. Like you put any linebacker and they're never going to be there's never going to be just a great linebacker in coverage, where you just put them in man coverage. There's some guys out there, but you're not going to see those guys. And I think he does a good enough job to be really excited about his growth.
Yes, and he showed the awareness on like robot technique off of play action, which robot means roll over and back. So basically when the offense runs a play action, if you're a linebacker, you have to execute your run fit. You have to go and at least attempt to fill your run fit, but you also have to be cognizant of the passing possibility. So you go up to say whatever your run fit is, B, C gap, whatever, A gap. You go up, press the line of scrimmage. You see it's a play action, and then you turn your back towards the offense and you roll over, go back, find the crosser, whether that be a number 3 or number 2 receiver from the backside, and then stick to him. He showed that on his film. He has that within his wheelhouse. I think he's a little stiff in the hips, but he has enough fluidity to pull that off and not look terrible doing it. And he's a 6 foot. What's up, bud?
Well, I was going to say, if people are wondering what you're talking about, it was that Micah Parsons versus the Bucks play, and everyone, there was like just look at this guy he's lost out there. It's like, no, he's doing exactly what he's taught, where people thought he was just like running around with his head cut off.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous take on Twitter by I think a big personality on Twitter too. But he's a 6 foot. Leo Chenal is a 6'2", a little bit more than that, 250 pounds, man. He was rumored to be playing at 260, and he's doing all this. And you talked about his heavy hands, and that's something that really, really popped up. But when you're that big, you think of like a 1990s linebacker. He can't do anything athletically. And like I said, I have my slight concerns. I think he's a better tester athletically than what I saw on tape, but still the testing was elite. 94th percentile on the broad jump, 96th percentile on the vert, 91st percentile on the 40, and then 87th with the 10-yard split, which is really, really important when you blitz, because the 10-yard split is how fast can you accelerate from a non-start to a start? How fast can you go from 0 to 100? And he ran a 155 with his 10-yard split at 250 pounds. That's really, really impressive. So we know Patrick Graham, we know Wink Martindale wants to blitz, Bobby, and I can't think of other players that aren't being discussed in the first round that fits this system in terms of a blitzing linebacker better than Leo Chenal.
Yeah, I'm in love. Here's a question I'll ask. I think he does a pretty good job processing and diagnosing plays. But there is times where he gets caught out of place trying to make a big play with his instincts. But then there's also times where it's like he's reading a wham block and he's seeing this cutback, a mile before it happens and sets it up. Like, is that a worry about him? It's like, well, if he's brought into a scheme where it's like you run fit, are you a little worried that maybe you don't see as the big plays that he did at Wisconsin where they let him free ball it a little bit?
Well, he's a young player. This is somebody who had a couple years or 3 years of experience at Wisconsin, didn't play a lot in 2019. And he's coming out, I believe, as a redshirt sophomore, because I think he redshirted in 2019 after maybe an injury or something. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I have that in my evaluation as well. He guesses a bit when he's reading the offense and doesn't always optimally position himself. I think all that can be developed. And I think Wink Martindale is a good enough coach, and the Giants have surrounded enough coaches to enhance that problem. It all comes down to, can this kid learn? And I don't know. I haven't talked with Leo Chenal, so they're going to address all that in the formal interviews and the interviews that they had at the combine and everything like that. And as long as he has the processing and the mental processing ability to do that, which I feel like there were plays on film where I saw mental processing, but I did also see the guessing a little bit. I think that can be rectified. It's not something I'm overly worried about. What about you?
Yeah, and I would rather have that issue than a guy who is just sit, and it's like, all right, by the time you've read this and decided to go, you've got a guard in your lap, which, we're going to talk about Damone Clark, Damone Clark's a better athlete than him, but it's like he does a good job. He's disciplined, but it's like sometimes you can be too disciplined to where you're allowing a 4 yard gain, which when it could have been a 2 yard gain. But yeah, this is the guy I wish inside linebacker is a need for the Giants, but I don't think it's the biggest pressing need. And I would be banging the drum for Leo Chenal more if it wasn't like we have so many needs. Like we're probably gonna need a cornerback with James Bradbury, because I would be like round 2, get this guy, because I really think he's worth that. But if he's there in round 3, it's like ignore every other position in need. I want Leo Chenal.
And that also goes to what we were talking about earlier with trading back. If you trade back, you're probably going to get another pick, possibly in the 30s, maybe in the 40s. And you can address something at 36, maybe go BPA. And if Chenal is still around with that second round pick, then you can execute that pick then and upgrade your defense in the image of Wink Martindale.
Right. Which I'm very excited to see what Wink Martindale does with this defense that doesn't. It's got some good. It's got some good talent, but there's a big need for edge. I'm excited to see what he does with this defense, because he's basically the opposite of what Patrick Graham had done the last 2 years. So since we're talking off-ball stack linebackers, do you want to hit Damone Clark next?
Yeah, I like Damone Clark. I think everything that you said was accurate, though. I think sometimes it's a little bit late to process, specifically when like jet sweeps or any kind of wide receiver is coming into the mesh point right at the snap. And I also felt like he had this weird knack to kind of hop on his toes when the snap happened, and that would kind of delay his reaction time as to what was happening on the offense. So I felt like that was a little issue that I had with Damone Clark. But in terms of the coverage ability, the ability to penetrate and shoot gaps when asked to, and just his overall athletic ability and size, I appreciated what I saw from him. I haven't written my evaluation on Damone Clark yet, nor did I with Neil Farrell, but I've watched a lot of LSU defense. So with Clark, he's 6'2", 239 pounds, has a really long wingspan of 78.5 inches, which is 90th percentile for linebackers, with 33-inch arms. And he ran a 4.57. Thought he was going to run a little bit even faster than that, because I feel like he does have the play speed and the pursuit. And what I also like about him is the leadership qualities that he displayed at LSU, because this is somebody who wore the number 18 jersey, which is a huge deal at LSU. He stepped up, and I felt like the progression from his junior to senior year was enough for me to be like, he can realistically progress, because he still has some things to work on, like we said, with the pre-snap reading and everything and the recognition, which I don't feel like it was always terrible, but there were plays where it was. I feel like he can grow from that senior season, what he did at the Senior Bowl, what he did at the Combine, and take that and also develop here with New York. And I don't think he has to necessarily be relied on in this first year now that Blake Martinez is coming back. So I think that's another thing that I think of. I really want I want a linebacker from this draft, because I'm not a big Tay Crowder guy. I don't think Tay Crowder is a difference maker. And that's what you get when you're picking, last in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. I think he's nice for a Mr. Irrelevant draft pick. Blake Martinez isn't a long-term fixture. I think the Giants should find somebody at that second level who can be a difference maker. I don't know if that's going to be Damone Clark. I think there's a lot of solid linebacker options in this draft, but he's somebody that definitely catches my mind. I would take Chenal over him, though.
Inside linebacker for the Giants, it's the position of need for me that's not the biggest position of need, because Wink likes to run a lot of one inside linebacker sets and run nickel, or not nickel, everyone runs nickel, but like dime packages, and like you said, we talk about running the outside linebackers. So it's definitely a position of need, but it's like if they're rolling with Blake, Tay Crowder, and then fill in the blank vet minimum like Reggie Ragland type, like I'm fine with it. That's putting a lot of faith on Blake coming post injury, but Blake's going to play regardless, so he's going to be that Mike linebacker for them. But like you said, like I like Damone Clark's speed. And like there is good examples of him processing his stuff, and part of that is the way a defense is called too. Like if a defense like, hey, we don't want you going crazy and being super instinctive. We want you playing your run fits and not blowing plays there. So there's a lot there to work with Damone Clark. And like you said, I thought he would test better than what he did too, even though it wasn't bad testing.
Yeah. So I actually went into this and I told myself, because on Big Blue Banter, I talk a lot about Quay Walker, the linebacker from Georgia. And I haven't talked too much about Channing Tindall, the other linebacker from Georgia, but those are two day 2 names that have to be acknowledged as well. Channing Tindall's never started a game in college, but that's because he played at Georgia with all the linebackers and all the talent that's down there. But that guy was at like the University of South Carolina, or even another like good SEC school, we could be talking about him in a more favorable light. Amazing athletes. I just think the linebacker position is deep. And that's why I never fully understood the mocking of Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd to the Giants, even with a trade down situation, because I like Christian Harris, the Channington, and I just think it's a deep linebacker class in general. You can even go with the Montana State kid, who was a Troy Anderson right there. Yep, I got it right in front of me. I feel like he's an interesting player who was like a quarterback and a running back for the first 2 years up there at Montana State and had a really good Senior Bowl, good combine. I just feel like there's a lot of interesting linebackers in this draft. So that's why I was always with the Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean. I feel like they're good players, but for the Giants, with all the needs they have, I wasn't necessarily on board with that.
Yeah, I still got a lot of guys to watch. And like I love Nakobe Dean. I haven't done like a full thing on him, but I do love him. But um I just Nakobe Dean's the type of player where it's like you're not watching him, but you end up watching him because of the plays he makes and how he fits stuff up perfectly.
And he's good. And I don't want to act like I don't think he's good, but when you have those guys in front of you, and as it goes with Channing Tindall and Quay Walker, who are, lesser prospects than Nakobe Dean, it helps you when you have a Jordan Davis from a 3 technique slanting to take out the center. So now you have an open alley in the B gap because you had Trayvon Walker aligned as a 5 technique to occupy the tackle. So like it really helps you when you have all of that going on in front of you. Not to mention they had Devontae Wyatt on the backside. It's just wild to think about. Like so many first
front seven's nasty. Like it's got to go down as one of the best front sevens ever.
And then you have Darian Kendrick at cornerback, the Clemson transfer, and freaking Lewis Sign at safety, who is like an amazing prospect as well, who could be in consideration for the Giants. I don't think he would be, but he could be at 36.
Right. All right, let's finish it off. Let's hit it with the DB, cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt. It's the position I have the hardest time watching, so I'm definitely going to be, perking my ears up a little more. What do you got on Cam Taylor-Britt?
So I haven't watched Cam Taylor-Britt since I think he was one of my first evaluations that I did. So way back in December. But when I watched him, one thing stuck out to me. This guy is wildly physical. And I love that. And I felt like just playing in Nebraska, they didn't play too much press man. I felt like when he wasn't press man, he was solid at it, but it was a lot of, I'm just going to jam real quick and then sink into his zone. So it wasn't even really man, but it was a press alignment. Remember, press is an alignment, jam is an action. So it was a lot of that, but there were times where he had to carry cornerbacks vertically, and I felt like he showed solid hip fluidity. And there were a couple reps where I questioned his vertical speed. So I thought he wasn't going to test that way. I thought he was going to be like a 4.52 guy, something. Goes out there and runs a 4.38 at the combine. It kind of shocked me a little bit. And he's 5'11", 196 pounds. I honestly thought that he would be a player that can convert to safety, kind of like Brandon Stevens did. The kid out of SMU last year was a 4th-round pick by Baltimore. He was a cornerback who converted to safety, and Wink Martindale used him as a safety in their blitz packages and everything going on the back end, played single high, did a lot of different stuff with Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott and all the safeties that they had over there in Baltimore. So I figured that he could possibly be somebody who would play corner, switch to safety, but I think he can also play cornerback, man. I mean, it's not ideal length, 31.5 inches. It's not bad, but 32 is like that benchmark that you really kind of look for. Big hands, wildly physical. I think he's athletic enough to keep up in-man coverage. And I felt like he was a smart player. And there were times, bro, where like they would try to throw wide receiver screens towards him and they would attempt to stalk block this dude. And this dude would come up and just annihilate the poor wide receiver who did not watch enough tape on Cam Taylor-Britt to realize that you cannot go up against somebody this physical and do that. That's kind of why I think he has that imposing type of play style that could fit at safety because of his ability to run support and his tackling ability. So I'm interested in him in general. And I think he could be a day 3 pick, which is interesting, mainly because I think he could be used as well as a safety.
Okay, so I agree with you 100% on coming up in the run game. Like he can change direction quick. So you saying move to safety really piques my interest because at corner, and correct me where I am, because this is a position I have the hardest. I can watch in the NFL because you can tell what good cornerback plays, but projecting at corner is he stays in his back pedal really for a long time, and he gives a lot of cushion. And it's like, hey, he's got a good ability to jump on a route, but there's so much cushion sometimes, whether it's a slant, in, dig, whatever, he's got so much cushion that it's like, hey, no matter how fast you close, you're giving up that catch. But when you say moving the safety, that like piques my interest a little more. It's like, well, because those traits do fit there. And like you said, you mentioned the run support he's able to provide. Like that definitely piques my interest a lot more for Cam.
Yes, and the cushion could also be a coaching point. And again, I when I watched the film, I did not see a 4.38 athlete. I thought he was going to be slower than that. So there's some play speed questions there and how that would translate to being a starting quarterback in the NFL. But we're talking about a day 3 pick here. If we want to talk about a day 2 pick and somebody that would really like a Tariq Woolen at a UTSA, that is somebody who will press the line of scrimmage, use his length, keeps his profile pretty low, very fluid for somebody who is legit like 6'4". It's kind of wild how long and how big he actually is. So the Giants don't go with an Ahmad Sauce Gardner in the first round. I'm looking at pick 36. I'm looking at Tariq Woolen from UTSA. I'm looking at Kyler Gordon from Washington. He's somebody that I felt like was going to test a little bit better than he did, but he's an excellent athlete. They run a lot of zone up there, but I feel like he has the traits to play man coverage. And then Kaiir Elam is another one from Florida who's very physical, lined like a lot of press. And I wish he was a little bit better of a tackler. I think that's a fair criticism in the open field. For whatever reason, he misses tackles. I don't know if that's a coaching point or what. Get Jerome Henderson into his ear, and maybe he can correct that. But in terms of being a press man corner, I feel like he can have success at the NFL.
You mentioned Kyler Gordon. I'm glad you did because I wanted to ask you about him. How hard of a time do you have projecting? Because like you mentioned, I mean, they had him as a bailed cover 3 corner a lot. And it's like, man, you're just like – they're preventing the big plays, but it's like, it's for me, especially because I don't know the ins and outs of cornerback play as much as I do other positions, probably my biggest weakness. Like, I just have a hard time like projecting and evaluating that because it's like, man, just at least in the couple games I watch, it's like he's a bail cover 3 corner every single rep.
Yeah, they play a ton of zone up there. And now I haven't done an evaluation on them. All my film on them is from watching other players that went up against Washington and also just watching Washington on Saturdays and stuff like that. But you can see the athletic traits in terms of like the short area quickness when he clicks and closes coming downhill, his ability to flip his hips, even though he is in a cover 3, if somebody is running the seam, his ability to kind of explode laterally and get up the seam to cover that route from that cover 3 position to kind of close with in that area. I just feel like he has that burst and that explosiveness. And I expected him to test a little bit better than he did. I don't have his testing numbers in front of me, but I think it was like a 4.5 or something like that. And I felt like he was going to be like a 4.4 type of athlete with a little bit better vertical and broad jump. I don't have the numbers in front of me at the moment, though.
No doubt. Well, Nick, we appreciate this as always. Who are you betting on to be the player picked by the Giants out of these 6?
So it has to be these 6. I'm going to go with Leo Chenal, man.
Okay, that's what I'm hoping for. With Greg Dulcich as 2.
Yeah, I look at I think Trey McBride. And I would have went with McBride, but he's just too highly touted.
Yeah, he's a lot of people's number 1 tight end, including myself. So
I think the Giants might look at him at 36, man.
I wouldn't be mad. I think they probably wouldn't be like my guy to go get, but if you're getting the best tight end and they believe in him, like I wouldn't be mad at all. Are you talking about Chenal or McBride?
I'm thinking of both, but I was talking about McBride. I think a lot of things can happen. I don't think a tight end is going to go on day 1. It all depends, man, because they got Dawson Knox in round 3. So it was late day 2. But Dawson Knox, man, like he was like a diamond in the rough because he played on an offense with DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and then their 11 personnel package was silly. So Dawson Knox never really saw the ball, but the traits were there. The athletic ability was there as long as he could stay healthy, which he was able to do in the NFL.
Yeah, I remember watching. We didn't do this as heavily in 2019, but it was like we watched all 3 of those. What was it? Hollywood Brown, AJ. I loved AJ Brown, and then like you mentioned Dawson Knox. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. So I hope people enjoyed it. Where can people find you and get more consistent Nick Falato discussion?
So you can find the podcast, Big Blue Banter. It's myself, CBS's Dan Schneier, talking about the Giants, talking about the X's and O's, philosophies, all of that. Find that really anywhere you get your podcast. That's Big Blue Banter. You can also find a lot of my work at Big Blue View. That's writing and podcasting, the Big Blue View Radio. You can check that out, iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff. All my writing is on Big Blue View. Find me on Twitter at Nick Falato. That is FALATO, Foxtrot, Alpha, Lima, Alpha, Tango, Oscar. And also do work for Patty Traina at Sports Illustrated, so you can find some of my draft stuff there.
Great stuff. I always bring this up is when me and you got introduced to each other because I wrote for Patty Traina for like a couple months in 2019, and you had just like came onto the scene, and I think you were writing for Ed Valentine and Big Blue View, and my first one was Nick Gates' first game at right tackle, and you put one out like 2 hours before. I'm like, oh my god! And I was like, let me get a hold of him and let him know I didn't just like copy and paste his article because they were very similar.
I remember that, but like great minds think alike, Bobby. And I also like that's how we became introduced, and that's how our like Twitter friendship started because we've met once in person in passing at a Mets game, but we haven't hung out other than that. And I would like to hang out with you. You seem like a cool guy.
Yeah, we definitely do, and that Mets game might be the most drunk I've been in the last like 5 years because it just rained and we just kept on drinking and waiting for that game to start, and was a good time. But it was good to finally meet. And again, we gotta do more stuff in person. Any chance we're gonna get you in New York for the draft, or are you gonna be back in Arizona?
I'll probably be in Arizona, or I could be in Vegas because we blue.
Oh yeah, that's close.
Big Blue View is we're owned by Blue Wire Podcasting, and they have a studio in the WinBet out there in Vegas, so they might bring us out there. I'm not 100% certain on that yet, though.
That'd be sick. Well, go check out all Nick Filato's work. It's definitely really good and informative stuff. Appreciate you as always, man. All right, thanks again, Nick, for coming on the show. Make sure to go give him a follow, check his stuff out. And again, we're starting draft month. So I'm very excited for Friday. Edge is probably the position I've got down the most. So we're starting off with it, and it's a huge position I need for the Giants. So we'll tweet out the schedule, draft breakdowns on Talking Football. We got a lot of draft content coming out and already out. So really excited about that. So again, follow along with us this month. Appreciate you guys. See you on Friday at the beginning of draft month, baby. Until then, let's go Big Blue.